It's just all 100% about work and dedication and how hard you're willing to work. I used to worry about the environment, but now I don't because I've met the person solving it. It's not the academic, not the government official, it's the entrepreneur that is saving the world. I've had massive failure. That summer camp business got $10 million in debt. And so I had to dig out of $10 million of debt and keep the business up and running. You don't have to be creative. Just go copy someone else's idea. Don't spend a bunch of money. If you can't prove the idea for 5,000, you're probably not going to make it with 100,000. Passion doesn't matter.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today. And in the studio, we have Jim Beach. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to have this conversation. This is going to be a good one. This is going to be somewhat unique. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, without further ado, let's get it started. So, Jim, you've done a lot of cool things in your career. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on some of the highlights
and lowlights?
And lowlights.
I really, I grew up here in Atlanta and always thought that I was going to work for Coca Cola. My goal in life was to be the CEO of Coca Cola. And I worked there when I was 16 in an internship and again during graduate school. And they came up to me, Rick, and said, "We'd like you to leave the building." And they kicked me out of there. And so I was devastated, had a midlife catastrophe, at the age of 22, and was just devastated. And they said that we think that you should go and be an entrepreneur. And I had never thought of that. That idea had never crossed my mind. And I decided I actually wanted to go back to graduate school and get an architecture degree. And so I applied for architecture school, and my thought was I would go to architecture school in the winter and then go to, start a business in the summer. And so I made a list of summertime businesses, landscaping and pool cleaning and summer camps and stuff like that. And I don't like being outdoors and hot and sweaty. And so I said, I'll start a summer camp. I started a summer camp in '94 at Stanford and MIT. And it was a computer summer camp, and we grew that to 89 locations in 7 years and got up to 89 locations at the big college in whatever city that you live in, including Sorbonne, Cambridge, Oxford, Adelaide, places in Australia, as well as Canada and the UK. And so that business was huge. It was a lot of fun, got up to 600 employees. And then at 31, I was able to get out of it and sold that business to the cheerleading camp people and got offered a job at Georgia State teaching international entrepreneurship and started doing that. And I made my class a bet, Rick. I bet that I could start a business that semester, make it cash flow positive that semester, and repay all of my startup capital that semester. And they got to choose the country and the industry that I would start the business in. And this was right after 9/11. So I chose Pakistan and furniture. So I had 3 months to build a profitable Pakistani furniture company. And if you scroll on my LinkedIn profile and go to my experiences and scroll to the very, very end, you will see the chairs, the products that we came up with. But we came up with an amazing, beautiful product. We took 100-year-old Killam rugs, Persian carpets, and cut them up and made that as the fabric on these beautiful chairs. And they were incredible. And I won the bet because I kind of stacked it. I sold the chairs for about $2,000 each. They were worth it. That was not a cheap price. They were deserving of that. And I was able to get them into Charleston from Pakistan for $460 each. So if I sold 5 or 6, I'd already paid for my entire order. I think I ordered 19 the first time. And I only had to sell a few of them. And so I put postcards in the mail to all the interior decorators in the United States, and they bought them up. And it was a huge success. And I made that bet with the class every semester then on. And the idea started percolating up, and I started realizing that I had a pattern. And my pattern was creativity is awesome for artists, but I'm going to go steal someone else's idea because I only have 3 months. I don't have time to have a new idea. I have to have an idea now. So I'm going to copy. And then risk, I realized that the more I spent, the more I would have to repay to win. And so I realized spending as little as possible was actually the goal, and don't want to spend more than $5,000 to start any business. And then I also realized I don't have passion for any of this stuff. I'm not passionate about this furniture. But you know what I was doing? I was loving the process. I was loving everything about it. And so that sort of formulated over the years. And finally, a Georgia Atlanta Constitution reporter said, you should write a book about this story. And so I made him a bet. If you find a publisher, I'll write the book. And a week later, we had a deal with McGraw Hill, which is about as prestigious as you can get. And you hear this idea we had to send 100 applications or 100 letters, and we got 99 rejections, and finally someone said yes, and we finally got a publisher. Rick, it all goes back to basic entrepreneurship. If your pitch is so good, so sexy that people say yes to that, you're going to get a book deal on the first letter. And our pitch was so compelling, so different from what everyone else was saying, that we got a deal within a week. And that book got 140 five-star reviews on Amazon and became a strong bestseller. And the thesis of the book was that entrepreneurship is not about creativity, risk, or passion. That when you get rid of those three things, it changes the game entirely and becomes something that is easier and doable to most people. And so that book led to a radio show. I started off on one station, one internet station, one day a week, and now I'm on 100 AM FM stations 5 days a week with two different shows, a short show and a long show, trying to get this idea out there that you don't have to be creative. Just go copy someone else's idea. 93% of entrepreneurs copied their idea from somebody else, 3%. So you're trying to be part of the hard 7%. I want to be part of the easy 93. And don't spend a bunch of money. If you can't prove the idea for 5,000, you're probably not going to make it with 100,000. Passion doesn't matter. You don't have to be passionate about the thing. You can be passionate about your lifestyle and your freedom and your opportunity. And if you want to make more, you work harder and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of an encapsulation of my life.
Wow. There's so much there. There's so many questions. The first question I have to go back is, Coca Cola suggested that you should be an entrepreneur. Why? I mean, I know why my parents kicked me out of the house, but no, I'm just kidding. Why? What did they see in you?
It was really, really harsh, Rick. I saved Coca Cola Japan $1 billion over 10 years. You know how they give an intern, they give them a project because they don't really know what to do with them.
Yeah.
And they gave me a project to redo the kickback. They have a kickback on all of the products. So if a 7-Eleven sells a 2-liter plastic bottle, they get 20 yen kickback or something like that. And they had about 5,000 different structures for different products with different people. And I rationalized them and got it down to 7, and it became predictable. And some people got less and some people got more, but overall Coke was going to save $1 billion. And then I got all of the bottlers to agree to do it. I was on my own the entire time, just working with my head down. No one asked me what I was doing. I didn't report to anybody all week. I just worked hard and got there early and stayed late and worked on weekends and got the project done. And at some point along the way, they just realized that I didn't really respect my boss. I have a long history of not respecting my boss. And that guy at Coke, who was my boss, he completely blew me off. And this is a really interesting lesson for everybody. He completely blew me off. I had that little meeting that you always have with the new boss. The new intern meets the new boss. And
Yeah.
I was in there for 5 minutes, and as I was leaving, he asked, "So where are you from?" And I said, "Atlanta." And he put 2 and 2 together, and he was like, "Oh, wait, you're from Atlanta. You probably know people at Coca Cola higher up than I know people at Coca Cola. How did you get here? Who pulled strings to get you here?" And he was right. I, in fact, did know people higher up at the company than he did. And, maybe that person knew. He had watched me grow up my entire life. He was a friend of the family. The guy who invented Diet Coke was a personal friend of the family. And you go to his house and he would mix a Coke right there from the ingredients, not out of a can, from the raw ingredients. He would mix a
Wow.
Coke for you. It was a real amazing thing. And maybe he saw it in me that I shouldn't work at the company, but there was no one there, Rick, and I saved him $1 billion that would support me.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. What do you think it is? That thing that you have. I mean, you've had success after success after success. You look at a
And
problem, you
failure after
develop a solution.
failure after failure. I left that part out, but I've had many failures too.
Sure. But do you think that there's something that perhaps you're seeing, or there's an approach that you're taking, creating chairs, making chairs, in Pakistan, from 100-year-old rugs, or, whatever. I mean, that's not something I think the average person would think about. I mean, how did you put that to, I mean, I don't know that there's demand for that. I wouldn't be thinking that way. So what was it? What is it?
You know, I have trained myself to be a little bit different. So I travel a lot. And when I look around and I see things, and 30 years, not 30, 10 years before I did that furniture company, I saw a piece of luggage that was made out of Killam carpet. It was like a weekend bag at the Santa Barbara flea market. And 10 years later, I stole from that idea. And, I that was a 10-year-old idea that I had that I stole from the Santa Barbara flea market. The product I did after that was 2-foot tall Christmas trees for the Japanese market. I had that idea when I was in London, and I saw the tiny little trees in London, and I was like, why don't they celebrate Christmas here? It's an island, and they've cut down all of the trees, and all of the architecture is made out of stone for a reason, because they don't have much wood there because they grow stuff. And so I was thinking, well, what other island countries that celebrate Christmas? Japan, where I lived, or where I have connections. And so that made a lot of sense. Instead of reading sports magazines, I don't watch sports on TV. I don't watch The Real Housewives. If I'm watching TV, it's educational history. But I also always am looking. I'm always looking around. What's this? What's that? Who could be this? What could that product? Who would want this? That's just the way I am, because I've trained myself to do that. I've done that for years because I've made a practice of doing that. If you go to a flea market, you should be there to look for business ideas. If you're reading a magazine, it should be to find a business idea to copy. So I've made that part of my personality by years of focusing on that. I'm also a huge introvert, Rick, huge introvert, but I've also realized it's hard to be a successful entrepreneur as an introvert. So I've changed my personality to fake extrovertism.
The extroverted introvert. I love it. I love it. I love it. What was the biggest hurdle with that? I mean, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for many years, and I'm an introvert as well. So what's your secret to success with that?
Just practice and doing it and doing it and doing it. I actually had a business partner in the very, very beginning, and the reason I brought him on was so that he could do the conversations that I was too shy to do. And it turned out he was shy in front of a big group. He's awesome one-on-one, or one on a girl at the bar, picking up girls, but one in front of 100 he wasn't comfortable with. And so I had to do it. You just do it again and again and again and again and again. And the most important thing is to realize this: the audience is very much on your side. They very much want you to succeed. The last thing they want is to sit through, I'm sorry, I don't know where, I'm supposed to make a presentation, but I'm really nervous. I don't know where my slides. People don't want to sit through that. That's embarrassing. And so they want you to be good. So they're very much on your side and very much going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Accept it. Accept their love and their warmth, and go up there and just start talking. And so I do think it's huge, huge importantly that you practice, and you can get a coach. We teach that here: communication skills. We teach media skills, and then also investor communication skills as two separate skill sets. But those are all things that you can work on and get better at. And here's the most important thing: whenever I go out to dinner, Rick, I sit at the bar. I don't sit at a table anymore. I sit at the bar. I usually go to PF Chang's and sit at the bar, and I've learned to talk to the people there. You go to the bar to talk. And so the people next to you are willing to talk to you by definition. That's why they're at the bar, not at a private table. And so you just start talking to people. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you get at it. And eventually it becomes comfortable. But it takes a long time. I've worked on this for 30 years.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. It's the exposure thing. Yeah,
Um,
I've had the same thing. I do the same thing at my gym. That's cool. You mentioned before that part of your secret to success was failures. What was a big failure that you had and that you had to come back from? I mean, I always look at this, two-sided. It's okay, I messed up, but then there's that emotional part of that that's just like, what about my value or my ability, et cetera, et cetera. What was your experience?
I've had massive failure. That summer camp business that I was telling you about with 600 employees got $10 million in debt at one point along the way. And so I had to dig out of $10 million of debt and keep the business up and running, and was able to do that. So that was a huge accomplishment. I went into the doctor one day and he said, "I'm going to go get you a hospital room. You stay here," because he wanted to put me in the hospital. And I put my clothes on and snuck out of the office because I had to go to a bank meeting and decided that was more important. At the end, I ended up in the hospital for over 60 days and was that sick and ended up having to have surgery and all sorts of stuff because I put that last. So certainly and I've had a corporate bankruptcy. I've had all of the problems, the lawsuits, the everything. And when you get into, the big boy world, you're going to get big boy lawsuits and stuff, things that are in no way my fault. I got sued for, I got sued for sexual harassment because all of the women in my office had large breasts. And I got sued for that. And in the first deposition, it turned out that I had hired every single one of them sight unseen. And that ended that. But I still spent $5,000 defending myself. But all of those women had been hired without me seeing them. As a matter of fact, I thought one of them was a man and hired her. And that wasn't a trans thing. It was just, I didn't know. I didn't pay attention. My friend said, "You need to hire this person, Nick." And I said, "Fine." I hired Nick. Nick was a woman. So I didn't pay that close attention. That's the sort of stuff that's going to happen to you. You're going to have unexpected things, unexpected challenges. Marketing was really hard for us some years, and then finance would be hard for us the next year. And then hiring 600 temporary employees is a challenge as well. So we had every possible down thing that you can think of. We filled up one camp, Rick, on the wrong dates. We
No.
filled it up here, but we booked here.
Um,
Every mistake that you can think of, we did. But then we also recovered. Oh, and here's the most important thing. We burned a building at Stanford.
I'm
Burned.
sorry. Like,
Building.
actually?
Actually, yeah.
Wow.
And the most important thing is at 7 o'clock the next morning, I was at the office of my contact at Stanford to apologize at 7 in the morning the next day.
Wow.
I didn't wait for her to come find me. I
Yeah.
didn't wait until 10 o'clock to go to her. I went to her at 7 in the morning and waited for her to get at work that day, because I tackled it head on, and so we weren't kicked off. We were back there the next week, the next year. We also flooded a computer room. There was a ice hockey rink above the computer room, and they turned the refrigeration off and it melted into our computer room. So those are the sort of things that you have to deal with. Or even this, I was sitting there one year and the insurance agent asked me how many kids. I told him the number of kids and he did the math and he said, "That's 18 broken arms this year." 18
Oh, wow.
times that I have to go to the emergency room in
Wow.
one summer. So you have, as you grow, you get all sorts of problems that you would never thought of. And so there's been lots of hard times.
Yeah.
Promise you.
For sure, for sure. Do you find it better to dive into a venture by yourself or with a partner?
I like having partners if you can agree on the rules, which is very hard to do, especially in a 50-50 situation. In my first venture, we were 50-50 and we never once talked about who was the boss or anything like that. And we were in a meeting one time and a rich investor guy who you would have heard of, someone famous, said, "Well, who's the CEO of this business?" And without a hesitation, I said, "I am," and didn't let my partner get a word in.
Huh,
And that took us years to recover from. But I was the CEO, he wasn't.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. What is the if you could put it together, or think about it, what do you think the most important lesson was in, like, all of your years as an entrepreneur?
It's just all 100% about work and dedication and how hard you're willing to work. Because everything else I can find on Google, YouTube for you to learn. The only thing that we can't give you forced into your head is the determination to do it. We can give you all the skills. We can teach you where to go. We can help you find an idea. But if you're still not going to go and work hard on it, it's still not going to succeed. So you still have to work really, really hard. Hate that 4-Hour Work Week book by Tim Ferriss. I think that's one of the most destructive books that has ever been written. Entrepreneurs, the idea that they can get by in 4 hours a week. That's after he got by on 400 hours a week for several years and then worked 80 hours a week for a couple more years and then worked 40 hours a week for a couple more years and then got to 4 hours a week. But he left that 10 years off. So I don't It's about work. It's about hard work. You buckling down and working when everyone else is playing.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, one of the other interesting things you mentioned earlier was, um, and forgive me if I misquoted, but you gave me the impression that, following your passion is not the best way to start a company. And this is, obviously in direct opposition to what lots and lots of gurus are saying. So like, you follow your passion, you never work a day in your life. Give me some insights on that.
Well, it depends on what you're passionate for. If you're passionate for purses and you love selling purses, aren't you inherently a materialist who's obsessed with a material object like purses? How can we find any value in that in the long term? You're not making the world a better place. You're not solving global poverty. You're just selling purses. There's nothing universally great about that, but you can still have a passion for that. And I'm all for that passion. That's great. I don't think that passion for an object, I consider it materialism, but a passion for a system. I love my architecture business. Well, that doesn't make sense either. That love word, that's a pretty strong word. You love it as much as your wife? You love it as much as your children? Would you rather be at your architecture practice or at the beach with your family and friends, or going down the Colorado River, or at a great museum in France? I would rather be at a great museum in France, Rick, than talking to you. I prefer that
That
we were
hurts.
both at a great museum in France and we could talk that way, right?
Love that.
But I'd rather be on vacation than working. And so I want passion to be relative. You should have passion for your church, your synagogue, your mosque, and your wife, your husband, your children, some of your in laws. And other than that, love is too strong a word. You should say, I really like my business. I really like what I do. Maybe passion will come later. So when I started a summer camp, I had zero passion for summer camp. I had zero passion for computers. I like computers. I'm a computer dork. I enjoy them. I'll play a game once a year. I enjoy them. I did when I was a kid a lot, right? But I'm not passionate about that until I got a letter that said, "Dear Jim, my daughter Sally was at one of your camps, and Sally had never had a best friend before, and she came home from your camp giggling and laughing, and we had not seen her laugh in 2 years. And now she has a best friend, and she's happier than she's ever been because you taught her that it's cool to be a dork. Thank you." Now, is it hard to be passionate about that business? No, you develop a strong passion when you realize that you're fixing children from an unhappy childhood. When year 2 or 3, when we realized that's what we were really doing, our marketing changed. That's when we had explosive growth. When
Yeah.
I could get mom on the phone and I would ask mom, "Is your child happy?" And you could hear her pause. And then you knew that the child was not. Does the child have a best friend? Man, we're going to give your child a best friend. Let's not even worry about the computer stuff. You send us your daughter, we're going to send her home happy. And we had rules. If you were at lunch and sitting by yourself, we would come pick your tray up and go put it down at a table with other kids there because no kid should eat alone at summer camp. And so we were very focused on the cultural things that we were doing. And because of that, the marketing got easier, the finances got easier, and then my passion developed. But I was 2 or 3 years in before the passion got there. So, in other words, I want you to be passionate about the process, the freedom. I don't work for you. You don't get to tell me what to do. I like that. And that's what I'm passionate about. And sometimes I discover a product that I can be passionate about. And that's even cooler. But that's the icing on the cake. I think passion should be icing on the cake, not a requirement.
Right. 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 I've heard people say multiple times, "Don't fall in love with the product, fall in love with the process." I love that. I love that. You're doing some other things that you're passionate about right now, aren't you?
I am, yes. I discovered some other things that I am passionate about. I've always been mildly concerned about the environment. I went to college in Vermont, in one of the most gorgeous places on earth. And, I didn't like it when I saw trash on the ground. And I like clean air and I like water that sparkles and stuff. And so when I was in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, I sailed across the Atlantic on a marine biology research sailboat and did research the entire summer on fjord water and whale patterns and stuff like that. And on my radio show about a year or so, 2 years ago now, I met an incredible guy named Wayne, and he was doing some amazing things with his business. And we got to know each other and said, I asked him if I could write a book about him. And he said yes. And so I started writing this book about him. And I realized that Wayne was actually symbolic of an entire new group of people that we need to focus on that we're not paying attention to. It's the environmental entrepreneur. So I am very concerned about the environment. I am very much a conservative person in terms of conserving. I don't like to waste paper clips. I use paper both sides, and I keep wrapping paper and reuse it next Christmas and crazy stuff like that. But I don't see that many things are getting done in the environment. We're having another Copa, and we just got Copa Brazil, another global economic or global environmental conference where all of the globalists and the environmentalists fly their private jets to Brazil and have a conference. And at the end, they tell us that we're not doing enough and they criticize us, and then that's it. Nothing's done. There's no improvement. Well, Wayne was improving the environment. His first business that he started when he was 16 was buying aircraft carriers and submarines and oil tankers and recycling them down to nothing. So he would buy 1,000-foot long ship and recycle it down to nothing. There was nothing left. Everything was recycled except for the batteries. So he spent 20 years researching how to recycle the batteries, and he got the patent on lithium battery recycling, spent $20 million. He just sold that business to BlackRock, so you don't get more prestigious or validated than that. And he was able to get Canada up to 96% battery recycling, when here in the United States, we hover right at 1%. And so he was a double environmental hero, in my opinion. He's doing great things for the environment two ways. And so I started researching other environmental entrepreneurs and discovered 216 American companies that are 100% for profit, but also 100% devoted to solving an environmental problem. So I met Gator Halpern, who is growing coral, sea coral, 50 times faster than God can. So we can go in and replace the coral that's damaged. I met Kevin Gast, who is running a company called Vater, VVATER, that uses a chemical process, not chemical, an electrical process to clean water so that water is 10 times cleaner than it's ever been. And so he's going into entire communities and delivering fresh, clean water to places that have never had clean water. Amazing people like this that are doing it for profit. Everything they're doing is for profit. So they're not out there raising money with grants. They're not going to the government saying, give me money, I'll do this. They're going to customers who are gladly paying them money because they gladly want their services. And so that's an entire paradigm change. Instead of the industry being based on begging, we can now say that environmental solutions are based on economics, people paying happily to get services that will take care of environmental problems. And there's every single environmental issue that you can think of. I met the guy solving that problem, or the woman. And so I don't worry about it at night. I sleep really well. I used to worry about the environment, but now I don't, because I've met the person solving it. And it's not the academic, not the government official, not the person who works for the UN. It's the entrepreneur that is saving the world. And so I have a new book out called Real Environmentalist. You can go to realenvironmentalist.com and see these heroes. And then we also have a collection of the 10 biggest hypocrites, the people who talk the most, like Leonardo DiCaprio, who says what a great environmentalist he is, and he gets the top award from the UN as one of the world's greatest environmentalists. But Rick, if you Google him and then type in like clean bird or plant tree or anything like that, you cannot find a picture of Leonardo DiCaprio ever doing anything to make the environment better. He's never actually gotten his hands dirty, ever. He's never done anything to make the environment better except give speeches and criticize my lifestyle while he's living on a super yacht. I call that a hypocrite. And so we made a list of the 10 biggest hypocrites. So we had ChatGPT actually create a ranking system so that it's not biased. It's not our opinion. It is ChatGPT generated data proving who these 10 hypocrites are. So that was a little bit of fun too.
Wow. Wow. That's wow. You know what's boggling my mind? I mean, not so much with the recycling, but the coral reefs. What is that revenue model? I mean, how is who's the customer? Who's paying for, and what are some creative ways that these guys are finding people to pay for what the work that they're doing?
Mostly the coral reefs get sold to resorts. A resort who wants a gorgeous dive right off of their beach. And so they'll come in and create an entire reef in the weekend. And they're also selling to governments who want to do repair. I think Australia is trying to repair the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, where people have hit it with their flippers and stuff like that. But most of their money comes from resorts.
Wow, wow.
Again, a paying customer.
Did I see something about like the microplastics? Someone's working
Yes.
on that.
This is actually the worst story. So this professor at UC San Diego was doing research on acids and the microplastics and dissolving the microplastics. And he developed a company. Well, he actually developed a technology, and a company came to him and said, would your technology be useful for this? And he was like, oh, yeah, sure. And so he's now had three multi-$100 million companies that have all been designed to either dissolve or to use the microplastics. They're making sneakers and Croc shoes and stuff out of them. And his boss, the dean of the department at UC San Diego, came to him and said, you've got to stop wasting your time on all of this silly research. Your job is to write papers, not to produce research that actually has a commercial application. So his boss actually yelled at him for solving the world's problems. And when that kind of mentality is out there and that kind of situation occurs, it's the system that's broken. Again, they just had Copa, I think it was Copa 26 in Brazil. None of my entrepreneurs were invited. The only people invited were academics, government people, NGOs, but no entrepreneurs were there. The people actually solving the stuff weren't invited, because
Wow.
we need to change the paradigm. We need to start, when we talk about the environment, we need to start including the entrepreneurs in the discussion.
So if the entrepreneurs were coming front of the table, so to speak, in those conversations, what would you expect? How would you expect the government to respond, or what would you expect them to do or contribute?
Get out of the way. Just get out of the way. When I ask my entrepreneurs, what's your biggest problem? They all say government, intervention. Government wants to come in and regulate something that they didn't understand in the first place. That's what we're finding. And so they just want to be left alone and left to solve their problem. They are very passionate. Once you realize that you're saving the earth, that's easy to get passionate about. And so
Yeah.
these are men, women who are incredibly passionate about what they're doing, and realizing that I'm saving the world and you're in the way. I don't need to fill out that paperwork. Go away. Let me do it. And so that's very much their attitude. They were usually cast out of the system. They were trying to work hard, and their boss came to them and said, don't do it. And now they're doing it and successful, and they're still being told, I know better than you. I should be involved in that now. We should probably regulate you. Now that you're good and big, we should regulate you. And that's kind of insulting and kind of crazy. Again, it really is a system where the people who are doing the work now want to protect their little fiefdom. And if I'm doing something to alter their fiefdom, they're going to get mad, even if it's making the fiefdom better. They weren't involved. And so they're going to feel left out, and they're going to get their little government feelings hurt.
Wow. That's wild. The other thing I'm thinking about is, that idea of going from, an idea is like, hey, what, I see a problem. So, I've consulted for a number of not-for-profit organizations, and the thinking is like, how do we continue to fund this thing? And so they're taking this a step further, saying, okay, we can sell these recycled ships, to whomever. How does one go from, that, almost a hobby into something that's sustainable, something that's growing, something that's really making that impact that it needs to make a difference in the world?
You know, I've been happily amazed how all of my entrepreneurs in the book have followed all of the rules. They all started small. A lot of times it was their passion. They didn't know they were going to change the world. They thought they were just going to make one small change. And they did it on the weekend or, on the side, and discovered it. Gator Halpern was taking a chemistry class and discovered this idea that he thought could lead to coral. And so he just messed around with it in the kitchen. And you find so many stories that way. Where was barefoot wine made? The first batch was made in their bathtub in their house, one of those types of stories. And it's just the good old fashioned American entrepreneurial story. Started in the garage, started on the pier, started with half a boat. And, now they have 700,000 gallons of water tanks. It's the typical story. Started small and the market proved them. And so they were able to take the next baby step. And they're just following the normal rules of market and demand all of us entrepreneurs face. When you're not begging, the rules change. It go back to the normal old rules. Here's my price. Is it a fair price? Yes, it is. Then I'll be successful.
What was the most interesting or surprising venture that you ran across?
Well, the first thing that jumped to mind is the company that I know the least amount. They wouldn't let me interview them. Bill Gates is their largest investor, and they provide carbon credits. And, so you can offset your private jet usage and stuff like that. They're cleaning the air. They have things at the top of skyscrapers that clean the air. And I think that they're 5 or 6 years away from being able to say we can modify the air and make the air what we want it to be. And so I think that's just one of the companies I've been saying, the land, the sea, and the air. I have entrepreneurs solving all of them in this work. The 216 companies. I guess the one that's the most interesting is the one that I know the least about because they won't talk to me. It's a European company. Maybe they're part of the James Bond complex. I've also had fun looking at all of these billionaires and the crazy things they're building and wondering if they're secretly a James Bond villain, like Zuckerberg building 50,000 square foot facility underground at his Hawaiian complex. What's he going to build underground in Hawaii? It's got all the markings of a James Bond movie.
Right? How fun was that? What was was there a venture that you had that was absolutely fun to build and grow and to make impact?
Well, I mean, the summer camp was fun because we were having the most fun ever. We were having shaving cream fights and I was 25 years old and playing Marco Polo every day and playing computer games. And we had cross country tournaments where Stanford was playing MIT and Emory was playing UC San Diego and Seattle was playing Denver. And, those were great, great fun. Summer camp is designed to be fun. And I was the chief fun master. And so, my definition of what was fun. And I have 100 cans of shaving cream right now. And let's go be crazy, And so that job was designed to be as much fun as you could have. We were trying to make kids have the most fun possible. And so we had a blast at that. And it was amazing to see kids come out of their shell. Remember, I said I was an introvert. I was one of my customers. And so I knew how to talk to the parents about it and how to hopefully help the kids with it. But that was so much fun, taking kids that were unhappy and making them happy for the first time. There's no business in the world that can compete with that. I'm actually thinking about starting a new version of it now to teach all of these kids that don't know how to shake hands and don't know how to say hello to a girl and all of those skills. I think we're going to have a generation of COVID kids that are lacking basic skills. So I'm concerned about our youth today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, this has been great. So, name of the show is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning. And so, what I've been asking my guests lately is, what would you recommend to people? Now, winning is defined by the individual, obviously, but the hard part about it is, in my mind, is the relentless pursuit. It's the not giving up. It's what you did. You've had these businesses and you failed and you've been successful, et cetera, et cetera. We got to keep going. What would you recommend to our audience to stay on track?
You just have to be super dedicated and devoted to it and realize that it is embarrassing if you fail and it's more fun to not fail. And so keep working harder and harder and harder. And the resources are out there. There's so many resources now available. I even met a female Native American venture fund manager. So she runs a female Native American venture fund. How specific can we get now with the resources available to us? You just have to keep fighting. Just have to keep fighting and realize that you're on a valid mission, you're on a noble mission, and keep going. And some days you're going to have horrible days, and the next day will be better. The next day will be better. You have to be an eternal optimist. So just
Yes.
keep fighting.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So you're doing you've got your radio show, you've got your book coming out, et cetera, et cetera. What's the best way for people to keep track of what you have going on?
You can go to jimbeach.com or schoolforstartupsradio.com. Those are the two best places.
And where can we get your book?
Amazon, just Amazon. And I have 3 books coming out in about 2 or 3 months. They're going to be fiction, telling the computer camp story from a fictional standpoint. That's an amazing story. How do you get $10 million in debt and repay? And it's a dark comedy. So if you want to read the history of that, check back in 2 or 3 months.
Excellent, excellent, fantastic. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fun. It's been informative.
Yeah, we have to go get lunch sometime soon, Rick. We're here in the same city. We need to go and meet each other.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.